Welcome to this week's workplace series. Have you ever discovered something you assumed was universal, only to realize that it wasn't? Now, I had that recently in a conversation with a friend of mine about in a dialogue. You know, the voice in your head that you hear when you're reading, writing, problem solving, second guessing yourself, or trying to work through a problem. Now, I had assumed wrongly that everybody had an inner voice. And that got me thinking, and not about the merits of inner voices and not about whether that's a key part of leadership, but about assumptions. Because there are things that we know. There are things that we think we know. And then there are things that we assume everyone else knows, sees, or experiences in precisely the same way that we do. And that's where leaders can become unstuck. Because in workplaces, assumptions are costly. You assume your team understands the strategy. You assume everyone interprets the feedback that you provide in the same way. You assume that silence means agreement. You assume your version that you've put out is clear. Often, it's not. And that's why intellectual humility matters. At its core, intellectual humility is the ability to recognize that your knowledge is limited. It's being wise enough to know that experience, seniority, expertise don't make you infallible. And in leadership, that matters. Because the most influential leaders are not the ones who pretend to have it all sorted, who pretend to have all the answers. They're the ones who are prepared to question what they may be missing, what they might not know. So what does this look like in practice? First, let's start with humility. That's about pausing long enough to ask, what am I assuming here? What haven't I tested? What don't I know? What conversation haven't I had that I need to have? Second, get curious. That's about asking better questions, inviting in different perspectives, seeking out people who see the issue differently from you. Now, curiosity isn't a soft skill, it's a strategic discipline. Third, you want to create space to actively reflect, because when you're always moving, always reacting, deciding at speed, it becomes very easy to confuse confidence with certainty that you're right. When you reflect, it can help you spot that gap between what you know and what you are simply assuming. That gap, finding that gap, matters because leadership isn't about knowing everything. It's about being aware enough to recognize the limitations of what you know and wise enough to challenge yourself to keep learning. So this week, notice your assumptions. And that's not to criticize yourself, but it's so that you can lead with more clarity, better judgment, and a little bit more humility. That's often where better decisions begin. Take care. I'll see you next week.